Thank you to the producers who make this mess possible. So I thought to myself, you know what goes with Dark Souls? Floral print. Welcome to the Dark Queen of Mortholme, a 20-minute anti-game about an unconventional relationship and the capacity for change. You play as the final boss of a Dark Souls game, with a pathetic but relentless hero nipping at your heels. Much like Project Zomboid, this is the story of how you died. You know the hero will eventually acquire enough knowledge, artifacts, weapons, and trickery to eventually take you down, and you play anyway. There's sort of a beautiful mortality in that. It's an interesting premise, and narrative games like this are often a very, very hard sell because obviously the pitch is you're going to die, you're going to fail, so you have to really sell the audience on the middle section. Really sell them on the journey, on the narrative of the game. And that's a very difficult thing to do. I think the premise is a very, very good hook, and it does a good job with that. So very, very well put together. I'm looking forward to revisiting it and giving some more coherent narrative feedback. So let's just go ahead and get into it. Well, that didn't last long. I'm pretty sure if I just sit here the entire time and don't press space, the hero will just never respawn. I know it's a really small thing to be criticizing, like such a small game that's made by one person as a passion project, but it does sort of undercut the narrative that I could just sit here, let the game run. You know, for a game that's being so haughty about its morals and whatnot, something that's always kind of bothered me about the game. I could just choose to sit on my throne and do nothing, but I think it'll make a slightly more compelling video if we actually finish the story. I don't think even in Dark Souls you respawn that fast. While once again, I certainly respect what the game is doing, the dialogue can sometimes come across a little too modern, a little too engrossed in video game terminology. You know, having looked at some of the fan art for this game as well, I'm not the first one to see a sort of interesting dommy-mommy aspect to the thinking behind this game, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but This developer might need to see somebody. You know, I find it interesting that the game seems to hang a lampshade less on the relationship between the actual hero and villain, and more on the loneliness of the villain that you're playing as. Okay, don't have the protagonist suddenly go from being a gamer to being some philosopher. I'll double down on that point from before, really seeing a lot of lampshades hung on the loneliness of power and being the queen, which is interesting. Dommy mommy. All right, well, there we go. The Dark Queen of Mortholme. I guess there's a couple different perspectives that we should talk about the game through. The first one being the actual animations and the sound and so much of the design aspects of the game. Gorgeous. 10 out of 10, every single one of them, especially for a game that's free and this small. I'd be really excited to see what else this developer does in the future. As far as story, it's... You know, You look at a piece of art and you always have to think, if this artist left less on the table, the product would be worse for it. It's just very, very interesting. I don't want to spend too much time trying to dive into the developer's psyche, but it's very interesting, first of all, to have used a woman, a queen, in the dominant role. And it's also very, very interesting the way that the creator seems to put this really distinct lampshade on the loneliness that this older woman in power must be feeling. And that's a very interesting contrast given some of the things I've seen on this developer's Twitter. Not that it really matters, but it's interesting. I mean, the developer uses Blue Sky and Tumblr to then create a video game in which you are going out trying to defeat an older woman in power who you hang a lampshade on her loneliness of being at the top. I find that very, very interesting. As far as where we are now culturally, but I don't want to spend too much time talking because honestly, I'm afraid that if I dive too deep, I'll just look at things that aren't there, because ultimately, it's a 20-minute anti-game, and it's pretty good at that. Highly recommend it. Links are going to be down in the description. Hope you guys have enjoyed the video. I, once again, am excited to hear more from this developer. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.